This is an English Tudor style hall table. We have a photograph of it from the early 1960s when it was bought used. I'm guessing that makes it probably no older than the 1940s. It's got a drop-down door for a compartment that has no back on it, and there's no sign that there ever was a back. I think the design intention was that you are just supposed to push it against a wall, and that acts as the back. Over the years, this malfunctioning drawer has given me lots of George Bailey moments, and I never got around to fixing it until now. As you'll see a little bit later, I think I went a little bit Clark Griswold on it. The drawer is very wide, and it just ran back and forth on this essentially piece of doweling using this slot in the back of the drawer. We never really liked these turned front legs, although they are typical of the English Tudor style. And the changes that I make to the legs really necessitate that I change the drawer pulls as well. The finish is flaking off in places, and on the inside there was a rubber stamp. The only legible part that you could recognize were the letters NADA, which means that it was made in Canada. Another clue that this is Canadian made is that all the fixtures are attached with Robertson screws, the square head screw that was invented in Canada and wasn't available anywhere else at that time. The finish is crackled, so I'm going to scrape it off and put some new finish on it. And one of the drawer sides has a crack in it, so I'm going to put some glue on that and clamp it up. Next, I'm going to remove the hardware. Next, I'm taking the top off so that I can more conveniently finish it and the cabinet. The top is held on with these cleats that fit into a slot on the cabinet, and that allows for the free movement of the wood when it's expanding and contracting with seasonal changes. The alterations that I'm making to this hall table are inspired by a mid-century modern end table that was the subject of another video of mine a few months ago. I decided to simplify both the top and the pull-down door by removing the stepped edges and smoothing them to a taper. I measured the profile and made a cardboard template that allowed me to find the steepest possible angle for the taper while removing the least amount of wood. Then I measured the angle with a protractor and discovered that it was 75 degrees. I rigged up a jig that attached to my table saw fence, and that would allow me to run the panel through on its end. I set the blade to 15 degrees, and of course that's 15 degrees off 90, which is 75 degrees. Clamping a straight piece of wood to the pull-down door allowed me to run it through the blade without it wobbling on the narrow end. Here's where the Clark Griswold part of the story begins. These undermount drawer pulls are actually too thick to fit underneath the drawer. The bottom of the drawer added to the depth of the side of the drawer that extends beyond it equals 1/2 inch, and that's how thick the drawer slides are. So I put the drawer on my table saw and cut out the width of the drawer pulls to make a hole. At least I didn't use a chainsaw. I attached the new backing for the drawer slides made from 1x4 with just 2 screws so that I could test the hardware by installing it temporarily first. Using the same material, I made mounts for the other part of the hardware. It's easy to find some great YouTube videos to learn how to install drawer hardware. Since this is only the second time I've ever done it, I'm probably not the best person to impart that information. I was able to install it successfully, but not without a lot of fiddling around that I'm not including in this video. Once I had it working properly, I took everything apart so that I could properly install it with glue and the rest of the screws. From inside the drawer, the boards that I used to attach the drawer pulls looked purposeless, so I installed these sides on them to create little storage cubbies. Since I couldn't use any of my clamps to fit inside the drawer, I used a thin piece of pine to wedge the glued up piece in place. These guys grew up watching me work on this project. This part might fall into the category of don't try this at home. It looks pretty dodgy, but my hands were always well away from the blade, and it was the only way that I felt that I could guarantee a nice straight cut. One of the stringers was detached from the leg, and I could see that it was connected with a piece of dowel. I noticed at this point that because of the awkwardness of pushing the table through the saw, I had actually made a nick in one of the legs. So I took a small piece of walnut and made it the right thickness, and then used it to fill the divot. Once the glue is dry, I trim it with a chisel and smooth it with some sandpaper. I measure the length of the leg and add 1/8 of an inch in order to compensate for the thickness of the saw blade, and that's how long I need to make the replacement leg. I also take note of the distance from the foot to the center of the dowel that attaches to the stringer on the table. I want to make a tapered replacement leg, so I draw a full-scale plan of it, and that way I can tell whether the stringer will fit within the dimensions, and it does. I start by cutting a square blank 2 inches by 2 inches from this piece of maple. The hall table is made from walnut, but I chose maple specifically for the contrast, to give it a more modern look. I made a tapering jig to cut the legs. Rather than cutting it all in one shot, I ran it through 3 times before I finally had the blade to the right height to cut all the way through the wood. The front has a taper and both sides have a taper, but the back side of the leg I left perpendicular to the floor so that the stringer could fit into it squarely. I fine-tuned the dimensions and smoothed the surface with an electric hand planer. Danny brought me this stick. He said I should use it because pine tastes better than maple. I decided to stick with my plan and continue to use the maple. The dimensions of the taper are slightly smaller than the part of the frame that they're attached to. I put it in place, I trace it, find the center, and that's where I put the dowel that is going to connect the leg to the frame. It's critical that the holes for the dowels in the frame and in the legs be perfectly parallel, and since I can't fit either of them on my drill press, it can help to have a block of wood that is perfectly square and has a perfectly perpendicular hole through it. Even with this kind of preparation, it's possible for things to go wrong, and because the walnut and the maple are both so hard, it's very easy for the drill bit to wander a little bit. Remember, I didn't intend to drill the hole in the center of that part of the frame, rather in the center of where the leg is going to fit. So this looks worse than it is, but it's still not good. And as a result, I have to drill the hole in the leg slightly off center in order to match. I make marks on each side of the leg in order to figure out exactly where the hole needs to go. I connect the opposite tick marks, and that creates a square in the center that allows me to mark where the center of the hole needs to be in order to line up with the hole in the frame. Even then I can't get the guide hole in the center. You see me put the point of the awl right on the crosshairs there, and I drive it in and it's still not centered. Anyway, I decide I'm just going to do my best and see what happens and adjust if I need to. It turns out I didn't need to. I dry fit the legs, and then I'm able to mark out where I want the hole for the stringer. I clamp the leg to the drill press with a wedge under it so that the hole is drilled in perpendicularly to the untapered side. I dry fit both legs just to make sure that the whole thing will stand without wobbling. It's at this point that I really get a sense of what it's going to look like. I make drawer pulls from a piece of maple that actually used to be a kitchen clock. Routing a round groove on the underside of the drawer pulls will give the fingertips something to grasp. Then I lay out in pencil the profile, both front and side, for the drawer pulls and shape them using my disc sander. My idea with the screws is that it's going to allow me to keep my fingers away from the sander, and it turns out that it really felt actually very precarious, and I was worried that the piece was going to get ripped out of my fingers. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos, and it's a lot more fun knowing that people are going to be watching. Thank you very much to the people who subscribed already. If you haven't subscribed and you like what you're seeing, please click subscribe and click like, and let me know what you think in the comments. I really appreciate it. Thanks. You might have noticed in some earlier shots that the top of the hall table is slightly warped, and until I sanded off the finish, I didn't notice that there were some hairline cracks at the edge joins, and so I'm just filling them here with wood filler. Now that all the structural work is done, I'm going to sand everything with 220 grit before putting on the finish. Since I'm significantly changing the design of this piece, I decided to burn my signature into the underside. The legs need feet, and the ones that are on the existing legs are in good shape, so I carefully take them off and put them on the new legs. I've marked out where I want the drawer pulls to go. I've cut some nails to ever so slightly longer than the depth of the hole in the drawer pull, and I put them in point side out, and then I press them up against the drawer, and that marks where I need to drill my holes. Because the pull down door is thinner at the edges where I've tapered them, I needed to get a different shaped hinge that extends further into the surface of the door, and the ones that I could find are too bright and shiny, so I'm going to disguise them with a bit of spray paint to make them look older. After a solid coat of black primer, I mist them with a little bit of copper colored spray paint. The inside of the drop-down door is going to be seen on a regular basis, so I decided to disguise the hole that was left by the doorknob with the rondelle that was underneath the doorknob on the outside of the door originally. The finish is my favorite polyurethane and stain in one, called Golden Oak. I apply 3 coats, followed by a light sanding with 400 grit sandpaper, and then a 4th coat to finish it. And to disguise the shiny screws on the inside, I flood it with a little bit of the polyurethane. This hall table, probably built about 80 years ago, in a style that's from about 500 years ago, now has a modern look. If you enjoyed this video, click subscribe, click like, and let me know what you think in the comments.